We are going to go feed a bottle calf. Yeah. So the boys are both different places this morning.
She grew up in a one-stoplight town in North Carolina, the daughter of two university agriculture workers, surrounded by the smell of farmland, but never living on it herself. She studied animal science, earned a master's degree, spent over a decade grinding through corporate sales across the state, and by all accounts, was building exactly the kind of stable, successful life most people chase. Company truck, gas card, benefits, a paycheck that kept the lights on. She was the breadwinner. Her husband was the quiet farmer who warned her straight to her face, "You'll never make a living out here. You'll only ever make a life." And she walked away anyway. No hired help, no safety net, two small kids and a farm full of old, breaking down equipment. What millions of people see when they watch Meredith Bernard's channel is warmth, authenticity, cast iron skillets, and cattle at sunrise. What they don't see is how close none of it came to ever existing, the fall off a horse that started. Everything, the camera she almost never picked up, and the brutal reality of farm life that plays out far beyond what any video can fully capture. This is what they don't tell you about this farm wife. Most people assume Meredith Bernard married into farm life the natural way, met a farmer, fell in love, moved to the country. The real story is a lot stranger than that, and it starts with a horse that didn't want to cooperate. Meredith had been riding since high school, obsessed with horses and the whole cowboy culture that came with them. But one day she took a bad fall, the kind that rattles your confidence and makes you question whether you should ever get back in the saddle again. Someone told her about Lawrence Bernard. Word was he had a gift with problem horses, the kind of guy who could figure out what was wrong when nobody else could. So she tracked him down. What Lawrence told her when she got there wasn't what she expected. He didn't look at the horse and say it was dangerous or difficult. He looked at her and told her the problem wasn't the animal. It was her own fear she needed to deal with. That piece of advice hit differently. It wasn't just about the horse. It was about every wall she'd ever talked herself into believing she couldn't climb. The two of them started working cattle together not long after, and by Lawrence's own account, that was all it took. He said he just knew he had to marry her. And that was that. What started as a spill in the dirt turned into a marriage, a family, and eventually one of the most recognized farm channels on YouTube. But none of it happens without that fall. And none of it happens without Lawrence seeing something in her that she hadn't fully seen in herself yet. That pattern of fear, push, and breakthrough would follow Meredith Bernard for the rest of her life. Here's what most people scrolling through Meredith's videos never stop to think about. When she made the decision to leave her corporate job in 2014, she wasn't walking away from something she hated. She was walking away from something that worked. For over 12 years, she had built a career in animal feed sales across North Carolina. She knew the industry, she knew the people, and she was good at it. Good enough that her territory kept growing, and the travel demands kept climbing with it. She had the company truck, the gas card, the benefits package, and a salary that her family genuinely depended on. Lawrence was farming, but Lawrence was honest about what that meant. He told her straight, "You're never going to make a living out here. You're going to make a life." That's not a sales pitch. That's a warning. And she heard it clearly and left anyway. What she stepped into was not a romantic countryside escape. It was a second-generation beef cattle farm with no hired hands, aging equipment that broke down constantly, and zero margin for error. Every repair bill, every bad harvest, every flooded field came out of the same small pot. She went from being the financial anchor of the household to learning how to drive a tractor and figure out farming on the fly, with two young kids alongside her doing the same thing. The version of farm life that audiences fall in love with on YouTube, the golden hour shots, the newborn calves, the cast iron cooking, that's all real. But behind every one of those moments is a woman who bet everything on a life that offered her no guarantees and did it without looking back. What most people don't realize is that the woman behind one of farming YouTube's most consistent channels almost never made a single video. Meredith had been writing blogs, magazine articles, social media posts. And that part came naturally. But video was a different animal entirely. Friends had been pushing her toward it for years, and she kept resisting. When she finally gave it a shot, her honest reaction was that she didn't like it. Not the process, not watching herself on screen, not any of it. She wasn't a natural in front of the camera, and she knew it. What changed things was a Farm Her conference out in Iowa. Being around other women who were telling their agricultural stories, building audiences, and connecting with people beyond their own fence lines shifted something in her thinking. She came home and decided to see if she could make it work. The setup she started with tells you everything about where her head was at. No professional equipment, no editing software, no production budget. Just an iPhone and the free iMovie app that was already on it. That was the entire operation. Lawrence, for his part, was not convinced. He watched her pour time into something he genuinely thought was going nowhere and told her as much. His exact words were that he thought she was digging in a blind hole. He showed up in the early videos so rarely that viewers barely knew he existed. The farmer at the center of the whole story was almost invisible in it. But Meredith kept going anyway, same way she got back on the horse, same way she left the career, same way she always had. And eventually, the blind hole turned into something neither of them fully expected. There's a version of farm life that television and social media have spent decades selling to people who don't live it. Wide open spaces, golden sunsets, a kind of honest simplicity that the modern world seems to have lost. Meredith Bernard has never pretended that's the full picture. She's said it plainly herself. She doesn't want to romanticize it, because the romanticized version isn't real, and her audience deserves better than that. The reality on Bernard Farm is that 2 people run the entire operation. No hired hands, no extra crew, no backup when something goes wrong. And things go wrong constantly. The farm has dealt with serious flooding across multiple years, the kind that doesn't just damage crops, but disrupts entire seasons and sets the financial calendar back in ways that take time to recover from. The equipment they run is old, and old equipment breaks. Stuck augers, frozen pipes, failing headers, chainsaw mishaps. The list of things that have gone sideways on camera alone is long enough to fill its own highlight reel. But the hardest moment the channel ever faced had nothing to do with machinery. Lawrence suffered a serious farming accident that was significant enough to pull viewers from around the world into genuine concern. People who had never met this quiet, reluctant farmer were leaving comments and sending messages praying for his recovery. That's the thing about showing the real version of a life. When people follow you through the hard parts consistently and without filters, they stop being an audience and start feeling like they have a stake in what happens next. Meredith understood that instinctively from the beginning, even when it meant putting the worst days on camera right alongside the best ones. When Meredith launched her YouTube channel in June 2017 with nothing but an iPhone and a free editing app, there was no business plan behind it. No monetization strategy, no brand partnerships lined up, no merchandise roadmap. It was just a woman on a farm trying to tell an honest story and see if anyone out there wanted to hear it. What it became is something neither she nor Lawrence could have mapped out if they'd tried. The channel now sits at over 800 videos. The writing career she built alongside it has placed her byline in publications like Successful Farming, Progressive Farmer, and AG Now, credible industry outlets that don't hand out column space lightly. The merchandise store at thisfarmwifeshop.com turned her brand into something tangible. Hats, t-shirts, tea towels, prints, all carrying the same unpretentious farm identity she built her audience on. And the ad revenue that once seemed like a long shot for a small channel in a niche corner of YouTube grew into a meaningful and consistent income stream that now contributes directly to the family's budget. Lawrence, the man who once called the whole thing a blind hole, stopped fussing a long time ago. But perhaps the most telling measure of what Meredith built isn't a subscriber count or a revenue estimate. It's the couple from Colorado who watched her videos while living in a city apartment, felt something shift in them, packed up their lives, moved to Texas, and bought a ranch. That's not a metric any analytics dashboard tracks. That's the kind of impact that happens when someone tells the truth about their life consistently, enough and long enough that it starts changing other people's. What Meredith Bernard built on Bernard Farm is bigger than a YouTube channel, and she'd probably be the first to tell you she never saw it coming. A woman who wasn't born into farming, who gave up financial security on a warning rather than a promise, who started with a free app and no plan. She became the face of something that people across 6 continents tune into because it makes them feel connected to a life they'll never live themselves. Viewers in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and New York City, all watching the same muddy fields, the same broken equipment, the same quiet farmer who doesn't fuss anymore. She didn't build an audience by being perfect. She built it by being relentlessly, uncomplicatedly honest about what farm life actually costs the people who choose it. And maybe that's the thing they never tell you. The most powerful story you can tell is just the true one.